The FIA just caught something inside Honda's 2026 engine system, and it's not what anyone expected. Why is a power unit that passed all initial checks now being torn apart for deploying energy in a way no other team can replicate? You're about to uncover how a single override function hidden deep in the software could give Aston Martin a decisive illegal edge, and how Adrian Newey's design may have been built around it from day one. And here's the catch: if this system is real, Aston Martin could lose their entire 2026 season before it even starts. The first warning didn't come from a whistleblower, it came from data. During a closed-door FIA analysis of projected 2026 telemetry, one set of simulations from Aston Martin stood out. Their car, equipped with Honda's new power unit, was delivering exit speeds and acceleration curves that outpaced rivals by margins too wide to ignore. The throttle traces were clean. Energy deployment was within nominal ranges. But something didn't add up. When compared against Red Bull, Ferrari, and Mercedes, Aston Martin's corner exit deltas looked engineered, not earned. That led FIA analysts to demand raw energy data straight from the power unit bench tests. And that's where they found the anomaly. Buried deep in the ERS logic, an obscure software loop was discovered: an energy routing sequence that appeared dormant under standard race conditions but could be triggered under specific thermal and load inputs. According to sources close to the investigation, this override mode allowed the MGUK to momentarily exceed standard output levels without spiking any regulatory sensor thresholds. In short, it created a burst of extra acceleration that remained invisible to the FIA's current detection framework. The brilliance of the system is that it never crossed a documented line. It reinterpreted how energy flow was defined within the regulation's digital language. And that's exactly why the FIA is panicking. Adrian Newey's fingerprints are all over this. While not involved in the software directly, Newey reportedly requested a power unit profile that allowed for extreme peak performance at corner exits to suit a chassis with ultra-high initial rotation and rear-end downforce. That request led Honda to innovate around how energy was delivered, not just how much. Their solution? A thermally triggered bypass system integrated into the battery management software that delivers what appears to be legal energy, but only because the current monitoring systems can't catch how it's released. It's not just smart. It's disruptive. And it could unravel the entire competitive balance of 2026. Inside Aston Martin's design offices, the override system wasn't treated as a bonus, it was the spine of the car. Newey's narrow sidepod philosophy, the ultra-low ride height concept, even the distribution of cooling zones were architected around this unique energy flow. If the FIA rules the system illegal, Aston Martin won't just lose performance, they'll lose the structural logic of their car. That's why team insiders are reportedly scrambling to model backup power unit scenarios, a process that could delay critical development milestones by weeks or even months. And in Formula One, falling behind before the season even begins can destroy your title hopes. At Honda's powertrain division in Sakura, Japan, the mood is defensive but not defeated. Engineers maintain that everything they built complies with the written rules. Their argument is simple: no regulation currently bans this kind of thermal logic-based deployment. And they're right technically. But the FIA's counterargument is chilling. Under Article 5.6 of the 2026 technical regulations, all performance systems must align not only with the written text but also with the intended fairness and cost control philosophy of the sport. In other words, just because something isn't banned, doesn't mean it's legal. That legal gray zone is now the center of Formula One's biggest controversy. Other teams have begun to act, quietly and aggressively. Mercedes has already issued a formal inquiry to the FIA requesting clarification on non-linear energy releases. Ferrari is rumored to have supplied comparative data highlighting inconsistencies in Aston Martin's predicted sector times. And Red Bull, whose previous partnership with Honda gives them a unique window into the Japanese engine maker's design habits, has remained strategically silent, likely watching and waiting for the fallout to settle before making their move. In Formula One, silence isn't weakness. It's preparation. And right now, every team is preparing for war over who controls the soul of 2026. The question now isn't whether the override system works, it's what the FIA will do about it. If they approve it, the door is open for every team to chase the same loophole, blowing open development budgets and triggering a power unit arms race before a single lap is run. If they ban it, Aston Martin could be left with a chassis that no longer matches its powertrain, and Honda could suffer catastrophic reputational damage. The entire 2026 regulation cycle hangs on how one line of code, written in the quiet of a Honda lab, is interpreted by the highest authority in the sport. And if the FIA gets it wrong, this could be the scandal that rewrites the future of Formula One. At the heart of this storm is a growing rift between Aston Martin's technical leadership and the FIA's regulatory core. What started as a performance discrepancy has escalated into a philosophical clash over what modern Formula One should allow. Aston Martin believes they've found a legal innovation, a loophole that no other team was clever enough to exploit. The FIA, on the other hand, views it as a threat to the integrity of the sport. For the FIA, letting this system stand would be admitting their oversight and setting a dangerous precedent that encourages every team to push the software frontier far beyond the intended spirit of competition. It's a power struggle, not just over the car, but over who gets to define the boundaries of F1 engineering. Within Aston Martin, the fallout is already visible. Engineers who spent over a year perfecting simulations around the override system are now being pulled into emergency contingency planning. There are whispers of a parallel development path being drafted, a Plan B car architecture that could survive without the override's performance boost. But switching to that plan would be like changing the blueprint for a skyscraper halfway through construction. It would mean scrapping months of CFD modeling, remapping power delivery strategies, and potentially rebuilding parts of the chassis to accommodate a more traditional engine profile. That kind of change, this late in the timeline, would devastate their competitiveness for the opening half of 2026. For Honda, the stakes are even higher. This power unit was more than just a comeback project, it was a chance to redefine their legacy. After years of humiliation during the McLaren partnership and a bittersweet departure from Red Bull, the 2026 engine was meant to showcase Honda's technological maturity, their ability to lead not follow in F1 innovation. But now, they're fighting a defensive war. If the FIA rules against them, it won't just be a technical defeat, it will be perceived as intentional circumvention of fair play. In Japanese corporate culture, where trust and honor are paramount, that could lead to internal repercussions far beyond the racetrack. The FIA knows all of this, and that's exactly why they're moving cautiously. They've reportedly set up a closed technical review panel specifically to evaluate the override code and its compliance with Articles 5.3 and 5.6 of the hybrid regulations. This isn't just about horsepower or deployment duration. It's about whether the system was designed in good faith. And if that panel rules against Honda, the FIA faces a nearly impossible choice: impose a quiet revision and hope no one notices, or issue a public reprimand and risk Honda withdrawing altogether. Either path leads to political fire. And in a championship cycle built on fragile alliances, fire spreads fast. Meanwhile, the paddock is watching every move. Teams are already lobbying behind closed doors, not just about this override but about what it represents. Red Bull has reportedly asked for a redefinition of adaptive deployment logic, while Mercedes is pushing for stricter transparency in battery discharge auditing. Ferrari, never one to miss a regulatory fight, is demanding that any new interpretations be applied retroactively, potentially invalidating Aston Martin's early sim results. This isn't just a tech scandal. It's a battlefield for control over the 2026 rulebook, and every team knows that whoever shapes the definitions now will control the performance curve for years to come. And yet, through all of this, Aston Martin and Honda remain silent publicly. There have been no press conferences, no pointed quotes, not even a denial. That silence is not ignorance, it's strategy. They know that one wrong word could signal guilt or panic. So instead, they're preparing their legal case, compiling every line of documentation that proves they played within the written lines. But here's the problem: in Formula One, perception is power. And even if Aston Martin is right by the rulebook, if they're seen as having betrayed the spirit of the sport, the damage to their reputation and to Honda's may be irreversible. Which leaves us with the central, terrifying question: what happens if the FIA declares the override legal, but morally wrong? Will the sport descend into a software arms race where innovation is indistinguishable from manipulation? Or will every other team be forced to copy Honda's architecture, creating a performance convergence that nullifies years of design advantage? Either outcome fractures the balance that the 2026 regulations were built to preserve. And in the middle of it all stands Aston Martin, a team that may have gone from genius to pariah in the span of a single software function. The clock is ticking, and the consequences are closing in fast.